Hi, gang. So this is our second class, and I wanted to give you this lecture. I will not make it as long as last week. I'll still do two different parts, but there's going to be a little bit more online work that I ask of you this week. But have no fear. I am going to review with you what is required for the class again, so that you get a sense of that. Okay? In fact, let's start there because I know some of you are anxious about this. So the requirements for the class are as follows: 6 one-page reflection papers, 1 annotated bibliography, which contains, I'm trying to remember exactly how many sources. Didn't have that committed to memory. I believe it's 10 to 12, 8 to 12 sources. All of this is in your syllabus. So an annotated bibliography, which contains 8 to 12 sources, a presentation on a topic that you will choose, and a final paper. There will also be a terminology exam. It'll be a quiz online. You'll be able to do it. And that's it. I mean, if you open your book and do it, I can't stop you. So you will have that at the end. But really, I think that's the least of your worries. So the way that I envision this course working, the way that what will help you, is to imagine us putting up a scaffolding. Does anybody know what a scaffolding is? Do you know? You put scaffolding up when you're trying to reach a high point. And scaffolding builds upon each of the layer below it to achieve that high point. So think about if you've been to New York City and you've walked around and you've seen these buildings that have scaffolding up on the side of the building. They're trying to reach a high point. The high point for you is your final paper. Okay, that's the point that you're trying to reach. What I'm helping you do with your 6 reflection papers, with your annotated bibliography, with your presentation, is to reach your final paper. Okay? So what I ask you to do to begin with is to look through the syllabus. Let me grab my copy of the syllabus here. Hold on just one second. Now, I'm a little old-fashioned in this sense. I still like the paper. If you can do this without the paper, more power to you. But you look through the syllabus and you choose a topic from the syllabus: cannibalism, race, immigration, refugees, slavery, capital punishment, rights, religion, vaccines, drugs, guns, free speech and press, bystanders versus good Samaritans, triage, aid and dying, genetics and cloning, abortion, sex, women's rights, prostitution, homosexuality. Just go through the list. These are all things that we will talk about to some extent throughout the semester. Choose 6 of those that interest you. Maybe there's another topic that's not on here that interests you. That's fine. You can send it to me. You have 6 topics, so maybe 5 of them are really good, and one thing that interests you is not so good. I'll work with you as best I can on that. But once you choose those 6 topics, then you will send them to me so that I'll have a record. And yes, I will keep a record of your 6 topics. Now, in writing your reflection paper, and I put this in the module, so you can go back and look at this, what I'm looking for in a reflection paper. Well, let's begin by asking, what is a reflection? Reflection, when you look at yourself in a mirror, you see yourself as you are, but it also enables you to look at yourself and think about what you need to change, right? So, you know what? I'm looking at myself right now. I'm going to use this Zoom since I'm looking at it right now and it shows my image back to me. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I don't like myself with these glasses. So I'm going to change that. My hair. There we go. Now, do I like what I see? Oh, wait. Oh, let me change myself a little bit more. There we go. Now see, I've changed my reflection. I've changed what I've been seeing. And what you see has changed now, changed dramatically. Well, that's what a reflection paper is, as much as you can do that in one page. What I'm asking you to do is the 6 topics that you chose, you'll think about those topics. Where do you stand? What might you change? How might your view change? Then do the reading that's assigned with that topic. Yes, that means in some cases you're going to have to skip ahead and do some reading. Do some other reading on it. Think about it. Talk about it with other people. And then come back to the topic and write about how you've changed or haven't changed. How has your view been reinforced? You're like, nope, I like my hair that way. I like my glasses. We're good. Well, that's fine too, as long as you have reflected on the topic. As long as you've thought about it. Okay, so that's your reflection papers, and I did put a handout in your module that explains how to do a reflection paper. Your annotated bibliography. I also put an example of that in there as well, how to do an annotated bibliography. So once you have chosen out of your 6, which will be your final topic, which will be the topic that you want to become an authority for this class on. And let's just say you want to be an authority on student loans, okay? You're going to become an authority on student loans. So you will begin to research all about student loans. You're going to look at, you know what? Wall Street Journal. We're going to look there. We're going to look at Department of Education, .gov. Yeah, let's do that. My own school, Raritan, they might have information about student loans, so that's a .edu. You might look other places, and you're going to come up with 8 to 10 different sources. You can come up with 20 if you want to, but between 8 and 10 of them, you're going to look at, and you're going to make some notes about why those sources will be helpful for you. What's in that source that you found that will make it easier for you to write a paper on student loans? Okay, so you go to the Department of Education website, departmentofed.gov, whatever it is. I don't know exactly what it is. U.S. Department of Education.gov. And you find that 95% of students in college today take out student loans. Something like 20% of them default on their loans within the first year. Well, then what I want you to do, if you think that's interesting and you think it might help you write your paper, just make a note of that. Make a note of that under the citation. Now, if you look at the handout I gave that I posted, you'll see this. So you make an entry, a citation. I found this information. This will be helpful for me because I'm going to use this in this way. You've had your first entry now for your annotated bibliography. Now you go to the second source. This time you're going to chronicleofhighereducation.edu, or is it a .org? I don't remember. But you go there, and they have article after article about how people are saddled with debt for years, even if they're paying their loans back, the interest rates are so high, they can't purchase a house, all of those things, you find all of that information. And you're like, that's good stuff, I can use that. So you make an entry, so you put down that URL, and then you make an entry explaining what you found there in the Chronicle of Higher Education, all the information you get from it. It can be a paragraph, it can be 2 or 3 lines, whatever it is, you put all that information down. Now you've got 2 entries. Now this is what I always tell students to do. Take my advice or don't, but I'm trying to make it easy on you, remember? So now you've chosen, you're going to write your final paper. You're going to become an authority on the ethics of student loans. Visit one website a night for a week, and you're almost done. All you got to do is visit, you're going to bed, you're thinking about, oh, I need to think about my paper topic, student loans. Let me just look on the internet, see what I can find. All right, you find something, Journal of Higher Ed. All right, copy, paste the article that you found there, the link to it into a Word page, write down what you found. You've got an entry done. If you do just one every night, one every other night, the annotated bibliography is really easy and can be done very quickly. This doesn't have to be a lot of intense work. So now, you've turned in your 6 topics. You're already writing reflection papers on those. I've told you how to work on your annotated bibliography. Now you begin to do intense research on that one topic, student loans. You're reading everything, not just websites, mind you. I need you to look for some journal articles. So you'll go through the school library website to find some journal articles. And with those, then you'll begin to put together a bibliography of sources that you can use. 8 to 10 of those you need to explain. The rest of them you don't have to explain to me. So once you put together that, you're doing your reading on this topic, student loans, you're thinking about it, is it really right? Should people go into debt for higher education, if you really think about it, why didn't the government help fund this? Because if people get decent jobs, then they're more likely to pay taxes. If they pay more taxes, the government has more. So it would seem like the government could make an investment. How did we come up with this system where we're the ones paying for the education? Oh, because education used to be for the elite only, and only certain people would be allowed to get an education and they could afford it. Oh, I see now. So it's an elitist thing that we've made education so expensive, and so that people are saddled with debt, so that when they graduate with their degree, they have so much debt they can't afford a new car, they can't afford to buy a house, and so they're paying off their student loans because they have entry-level jobs and they're living with their parents. So our whole system has become immoral in the sense that it is feeding off itself in this way. So you then begin to formulate your thesis. Student loans, unless used judiciously and wisely, can be horribly immoral and crippling to the individual and the macroeconomy. Did you know I got all that out of that? Yeah, I got all that out of that. And so then you begin to write your paper. And you write your paper. And you, whatever you want to say about it, but you're looking at it from an ethical point of view. It's what I'm asking you to do. It doesn't have to be strictly, but you're researching this topic and you're beginning to understand it and highlight some of the current moral and social issues with relating to this topic. Okay, and so then once you've written your paper, I would say put it aside for a little while. I'm assuming you're going to get it done early. You can do it. You can do it early. But then you're also going to plan your presentation. What did I learn in doing this paper? What did I come away with? If I had to give an elevator speech, you know what an elevator speech is? You get on the elevator and somebody said, well, what did you learn by doing that paper? And before the elevator reaches the top floor, you've got to be able to tell them. That's what I'm looking for in your presentation to me. You'll just tell me everything that you learned, just like that. Okay? Then you'll submit your paper. And I'll know what you're talking about, hopefully. But yet, when you do your presentation, if there are things that need to be changed, we'll talk about that as well. I hope that helps. Hope that helps understand how it is and what it is I'm expecting of you with regard to your paper. So now I want to go back and talk about some of the ethical constructs, some of the ethical theories, broad categories that I put out for you last week, and began to explain those. If you watched a couple of the videos, it talked about the three categories of ethical theory, and I talked about this last week. So the three categories, if you'll remember, are the consequentialism, and we have some specific models under that. So consequentialism, non-consequentialism, and we have some specific models under that. And then we have what I lovingly call the alternatives, kind of the catch-all, something that won't fit in these other two over here. Okay, so under consequentialism, I listed for you three in particular. And they're related. You have to understand these are always related in some way. And that's why they go under that broad category of consequentialism. But when we talk about consequentialism, the other term that we can use is teleological. Teleological. Now this gives us a clue for what consequentialism means. First of all, consequences, you look at the consequences of an action. You think about the consequences of what it is that you're doing or someone else is doing. To call it teleological, that comes from the Greek word there, telos, which should sound a little bit like telephone, telescope. And when you're using a telephone, you're talking to someone at a distance. If you're looking through a telescope, you're looking at something at a distance. So just like the consequences or the end result, teleological, telos, means the end. You're thinking about the end. What will the end result of my action be? Now, when you think about it that way, there are a couple of end results, interested parties, if you will. And so you could ask, well, if I do this, what's in it for me? What do I get out of this? And so we refer to that as the ego, me. It's egotistical, and we refer to it as egoism. So if I do this, everyone else be damned. What will I get out of this? If I kill my dad, what will I get out of it? I'll get all that money. I'll get the inheritance. Ah, yes. Yes, let's do it. Oh, but wait. I might go to jail if I get caught. Can I do it without getting caught? So then you begin to weigh the consequences, the end result. Yes, I might get the money, but I might go to prison or even get the death penalty, depending on where you live. So in consequentialism and egoism, you're looking at the result. What's in it for me? Now, another construct under that is what we call utility. Utility. It's sometimes known as the greatest happiness principle. So the principle of utility is sometimes known as the greatest happiness. And the principle of utility asks, when I do an action, what will produce the most good for the most number of people? So let's just say we're going to go back to killing your dad, okay? Your dad is a horrible person. He beats your mother. He beats your little siblings. He, I don't know, you name it, he does it. He's a horrible person. So then you begin to say, well, I will go to prison if I do this. But all my siblings will not be beaten anymore. My mother will not be beaten anymore. This and this and this will not happen anymore. So it'll make me really sad. It'll make things bad for me, but it'll make things really good for everyone else. So there you've changed it. Yes, I will go to prison, but they will be liberated. I will have to languish, and I'll go through a trial and all of this. It'll be horrible. But they will be free of a monster. And so as you weigh then the consequences of your action, the end result of your action, the telos of your action, you might come away with the conclusion, it's worth it. It's worth it. I will endure this for the sake of my family. It will hurt them, but it will help them truly in the long run. So then there is yet another one that we put under consequentialism and teleological principle, and that is the social contract theory. In the social contract theory, you're essentially saying, I'm going to limit something that I'm able to do for the sake of everyone else. I'm going to impose limits on myself, or I'm going to impose something on myself because I know others are doing that as well, and we are going to live in this society. Excuse me. And so we are in this unwritten contract. So a very good example of that is wearing your mask. Wearing your mask. What the scientists are asking us to do is to wear our mask as a form of social contract. If I have any elements of the disease of COVID, when I'm breathing them out, they're less likely to be emitted or emanate from my mouth and my nose by wearing the mask. I also get a little bit of benefit from this, that if someone else has it, there's a filter there so that I'm less likely to get it. So it's part of a social contract to wear a mask. Now, could it be the law that you do it? Certainly, we could make it a law. There could be consequences and fines for doing it. But what you're thinking in social contract theory is that everyone will be better off if we all wear masks. It's social contract theory. It's the same thing if I wear deodorant. Yeah, I can go about my day not wear deodorant. Nobody's going to tell me I got to bathe and wear deodorant. You're absolutely right. No one is going to make you wear deodorant. No one is going to make you bathe. But we all get a vote. And we could all say, to hell with you. I don't want to be around you. You stink. And so then I don't have to enter into relationship with it. I don't have to be in contact with you. So that's social contract theory. So all of these three I've put under consequentialism or teleology. Okay, you got it? Teleology. Now, a second category of ethical theory that I want to talk about is non-consequentialism. In non-consequentialism, you don't think about the consequences. You don't consider your consequences at all. Rather, you think about what ought to be done. What ought I to do in this situation? O-U-G-H-T, ought. What ought I to do? So we talk about non-consequentialism as being deontological. Deontological. D-E-O-N-T-O-L-O-G-I-C-A-L. Deontological. And that has to do with your duty. What is my duty in this situation? What is expected of me? You don't worry about the consequences. You simply say, what is the right thing to do? What is expected of me in this? And you do it. You do that thing. Now, there are a couple of ways of approaching this. The first one that I mentioned before is divine command. So somehow you perceive that God or the gods want you to do this. Let me give you an example. It comes from Hinduism. In the Bhagavad Gita, let me see if I can find my Bhagavad Gita very quickly. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a story about Krishna and Arjuna. Okay, Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna is a manifestation of a god. And Arjuna is a warrior. Arjuna needs to go out to do battle. And this is one of those old-fashioned battles where he's going to be riding in a chariot, and he's going to be the warrior on the back, and the charioteer will be driving him into battle. Arjuna on the battlefield looks out across the battlefield, and I'm going to paraphrase here. He looks out across the battlefield and he begins to see who's on the other side of the battlefield, who it is that he's supposed to kill in this battle. And Arjuna looks there and he sees Sam. Hey, Sam. Oh, wait. Sam's my enemy. I went to elementary school with Sam. We were in kindergarten together. We were in first and second grade together. I don't want to kill Sam. Sam was a good friend. He's a good kid. I liked Sam. He's a nice guy. And then he looks around the battlefield a little bit more. And, oh, look over there. It's Peter. Peter. Hey, Peter. Peter's a good guy. I had trouble with my chariot the other day, and he came along and helped me change my chariot wheel. Peter's a good guy. I told him I owe him one. I owe Peter one. Hey, Peter. Wait. Peter's over there with Sam. I've got to go do battle against Peter and Sam? I don't want to kill them. And so Arjuna begins to have second thoughts about battle. He begins to think, should I really do this or not? I don't think I want to do it. And then Krishna, who is his charioteer, remembers, he is a god that now takes on human form as a charioteer. He's the driver of the chariot. And Krishna begins to talk to him and say, Arjuna, Arjuna, what do you mean trying to back out of this right now? You have a duty to protect the people of your village. Sam and Peter over there, they don't care about your village. They want to destroy the people of your village. And if you don't kill them, then they're going to come over here and kill you and kill everybody in your village. Your parents, your siblings, everyone. So your responsibility, your duty, Arjuna, is not to think about that it's Sam and Peter over there, not to think about the consequences of this. Your duty is to go out there and just be the best damn warrior you can. And so Arjuna then is convinced that what God wants is for him to go do his duty. And in this case, it is to make war and to kill. Now, we have similar situations. We have real examples that we know. Look at the American Civil War. There, you at times literally had brother against brother. Do I get to choose if I kill my brother or not? Or am I just going to do my duty as a soldier? Think about it when maybe you played sports and you played against your friend. You're like, I don't want to win because it'll make her feel bad. She's my friend. We talk all the time on the phone. We're good friends. I don't want to make her feel bad by winning. But your coach says, go out there and win. It's your duty. Do your duty. So in divine command theory, we try to evaluate what it is that God expects of us. And we do whatever it is God expects without question of the consequences. The consequences, the end result, is not what we're thinking about here. We're simply doing our duty. To borrow a phrase, kill them all, let God sort it out. That is, if God has commanded you to do it. If God has commanded you to do it. And so this is a dilemma then that Socrates raises in the Euthyphro. And I've asked you to read the Euthyphro. And as you read the Euthyphro, the section I gave you, you find that Socrates raises the question, is this thing right because the gods want it? Or do the gods want it because it's right? Now, I've given you a discussion question, and I'd like you to wrestle with that a little bit. Wrestle with divine command. How does your approach change? If you say that something is right because God commands it, so then is going out, killing your friends, does that make it right? When we get to abortion, I'll give you an article that says that, you know what? Yeah, we should sacrifice. Yeah, abortion is killing babies. We're doing it for the gods. It's fine. The gods want it. Abortion is a sacrifice to Artemis. Let's do it. But of course, there are others who would be adamantly, diametrically opposed to that approach. And they would say, no, God doesn't want us to do that. So is it right because God commands it? Or does God command it because it's right? Now, that part of the question raises a dilemma as well. I'll leave you to try to figure that one out. So under non-consequentialism, we have divine command, then we have natural law. Natural law says we don't interfere with whatever nature is going to do. We try to determine what would be natural, and we just don't interfere. Now, if we intervene, then we are going against natural law. Now, natural law is also used very often in conjunction and in cooperation with divine command. But natural law can be separated from divine command to some extent. And so natural law theology is sometimes used to say, well, this is what God intends, that when a sperm meets an egg, it produces a zygote, then an embryo, then a baby, and then a human, fully formed, fully grown human. And so therefore to intervene in nature in any point along that line is to violate what is natural, and therefore to violate what God intended, if you wanted to mix it with divine command. But in natural law, you can also say, well, we don't have to worry about the animals in the wild. They will take care of themselves. But then if humans are there and we're intervening in the natural environment, are we changing it to some extent? So natural law. All right, and then I want to come to the final one, under non-consequentialism, under deontological deontology, and that is Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. I'm going to put my Bhagavad Gita back and see if I can find my grounding for the metaphysics of morals. Immanuel Kant, grounding for the metaphysics of morals. And then it has a little part down here called on a supposed right to lie, the cause of philanthropic concerns. Let's talk about Immanuel Kant. Then, when Immanuel Kant was writing in the 18th century, that's the 1700s for those of you who are trying to figure that out. When Immanuel Kant was writing, he was trying to find a way that he could decouple morality, ethical action from anything theological, anything to do with God. Is there a way to think about moral action that doesn't come back to God and what God would or wouldn't want? And so Immanuel Kant then formulated what he called the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative. The categorical imperative says, and here I'm going to read to you from Immanuel Kant, I should never act except in such a way that I can also will that my maxim should become a universal law. Now, maxim just is another way of saying action, my activity. So here is what he says. I should never act except in such a way that I can also want my action to become a universal law. So don't do anything that you wouldn't want to become a universal law. So when it comes to honesty versus stealing, am I going to steal or am I not going to steal? Well, let's think about it. If let's set up a scenario. In fact, I think I'm told by my students that there was a movie about this. I never saw the movie. Well, let's just say that you work in a bank. You work at JP Morgan Chase. And in your job there at the bank, you have the ability to take 1 penny from every account that they hold. And if you do that, you will then have enough money to live comfortably, and you will never be caught. You won't be caught. No one's going to catch you. Do you do it? Knowing you'll not be caught. The categorical imperative then requires that you ask yourself, now I can steal 1 penny. The operative key term there is stealing. Would I want to make it a universal law that anyone can steal anything they want? It will be okay. It will be okay for me to steal, provided everybody else in the world can steal anytime, anywhere, anything. And so then I began to think, no, I wouldn't want that to be a law that you could steal anything, anywhere, anytime from anybody. That would just be ridiculous, because then I couldn't have a car, I couldn't have a house, I couldn't have money, all this money that I stole, anybody else could steal. So Immanuel Kant would say, aha, then you can't steal that 1 penny, even if you wouldn't go to prison for it. That 1 penny from all those accounts. You can't do it, even if you can get away with it. What about murder? Let's take an easier one. He is the worst son of a bitch in the world. He is a dirty, rotten scoundrel. Well, let's put him on death row. Or not. Doesn't really matter. Is it okay to kill? Should I kill him? The answer might be, well, yeah, he's a dirty, rotten, nasty son of a bitch. Kill him. Kill the bastard. But then I'm going to make it a universal law. Remember what Immanuel Kant said. I should never act except in such a way that I can also want my action to become a universal law. So I don't like him. He's a dirty, rotten bastard. But I can't kill him. Because if I can kill him, it means that anybody can kill anyone, anywhere, anytime, for any reason. And I would never want that to be a law. Would never want that to happen. So what about lying? Immanuel Kant supposed a situation where, and this is where the subtitle of his work here, his treatise here, comes in. Because people would argue, it's all right to tell a white lie, especially if you're lying to somebody who's horrible. Yeah, go ahead and lie to them. And Immanuel Kant was saying, well, then it's okay if I lie to you, right? About anything I want to lie about, right? Yeah, I'm going to give everybody in the class an A automatically. Done. Everybody's got an A. And then you get your grade. And you're like, what the hell? You said I had an A. You know what? Somebody lied to me, so therefore I thought it was okay for me to lie to you. You would think that's horrible, right? Immanuel Kant says, therefore you can't even lie to a murderer. You can't even lie to a murderer. So under non-consequentialism, then we have divine command, natural law, and the categorical imperative, or sometimes called Kantianism. Now, if I ask you to approach a topic as a utilitarian, you're going to ask the question, well, what's the best thing for the most number of people? Versus if I ask you to approach something from a Kantian point of view, you're going to say, all right, what action would I want to become a universal law here? So when you do the exercise, keep that in mind. And then I mentioned that there are two alternatives. Two alternatives to these. I want to put my Immanuel Kant back. And I'm going to grab my I just saw it, my Carol Gilligan and my Aristotle. So let's begin with this. And let's talk about Aristotle. This is one of the classics, Aristotle, the Nicomachean or Nicomachean ethics. Aristotle was a student of Plato who had been a student of Socrates. And in his ethics, now I'm not going to go into details on this too much because this is not primarily where we'll be. But Aristotle formulated what's called eudaimonia, eudaimonia. Anytime you see EU in front of a word, it almost always means good. So eulogy, like you hear with relation to a funeral when someone dies, you talk about the eulogy. Logos means word. The EU means good words. Eugenics means, genics has to do with genes. Eugenics means good genes. So almost anytime you see EU in front of a word, it means good. So in Aristotle formulating what he called eudaimonia, he was talking about the good life. And this is not good life like, okay, I'm going to crack open a beer, put my feet up, and this is the good life. No, this is a virtuous, meaningful, fulfilling, right way to live. Okay? This has nothing to do with comfort. This has everything to do with what is the virtuous way to live. And Aristotle formulated that the way to achieve this was never to go from one extreme or the other. And so I posted the handout for you to look at last week. So when it comes to something like honesty, or let's talk about self-control. I think that's something we can really really get behind, self-control. So to be on the one hand, to have too little self-control, you'll be indecisive. To have too much, you might be considered impulsive. Courage. To have too little, you would be a coward. To have too much, you would be rash. Justice. To have too much, you would be selfish. To have too little, you would, to have too little justice, you would be selfish. And to have too much, there would be complete selflessness. And Aristotle thought the way to achieve then the eudaimonia, the good life, is to find that balance, to find a balance to live life. neither with excessives or deficiencies, without extremes or without lacking. And so Aristotle thought that would be the ideal way to live life. And so he called that eudaimonia. It's virtue ethics. So Aristotle thought that one good way to achieve this, one way to do this, is to find somebody who's lived that type of life and to imitate them, to live a life like them, and to practice, practice, practice. Do what they do and do it over and over and over again, and you'll become a virtuous person. Okay, and then I gave you another alternative, which I called care ethics. It was formulated by Carol Gilligan. Carol Gilligan was a student at Harvard in the 70s, I believe. And Gilligan had looked at all these approaches to making decisions. And what she found was that most of them were formulated by men. And she began to so here's a quote from her. Thus, it appears that men and women may experience attachment and separation in different ways, and that each sex perceives a danger which the other does not see. Men in connection, women in separation. And so she began to formulate that men and women approach these things in very, very different ways. Very, very different approaches. And so whereas men had tried to be systematic and to rid themselves from any influence of the other, and either think only about self, the greatest good for the greatest number, only think about what is your duty, those sorts of things. Gilligan began to say, you know what? There's a feminist approach to this, because as women, we see things differently. And so Gilligan then began to formulate what she called a different voice, a way of approaching ethical matters in a very different voice. And that was the feminine voice. And care ethics then is a little bit more nuanced, more subtle. Care ethics takes into consideration the whole of the system and in a more comforting, caring way than does just doing your duty. Or just asking, okay, let's do the math. This is good for 20 people. This is good for 5 people. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And Gilligan was willing to say, wait a minute, just because it's good for the majority doesn't mean you do it. There's a different way to approach this. And that is the feminist way. Now, when I say it's feminist, it doesn't mean that it can only be used by women. No, in fact, in one of my theses, when I wrote my MA thesis, I used care ethics. And I said that there's a way to approach someone, for example, at the end of their life that doesn't ask these systemic questions of duty versus what's the greatest good. There's a way to approach it with care and from a care ethic point of view. And so that then is the more feminist. And I've given you in your module a chapter from In a Different Voice by Carol Gilligan. Here's another thing, let me say, I'm going to put up more than you can read, more than you can watch. Just do your damnedest to keep up with it, though, as much as you can. And the reason I post so many of the clips is because I know you get tired of watching me like this. So, all right, gang, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to begin to wrap this up right now. And I'm going to ask you some of the clips I posted from last week to review them, to look over them again, especially when it comes to the 3 categories of ethical theory. I'm also going to post a discussion and a worksheet for you to do. And so I encourage you to do that and to keep up with that. I'll come back with another section of this lecture where I discuss a little bit of the readings because I want you to think about those as well, the readings from your textbooks. Okay, great. Have a good day.